As a supplier administrator, you can administer your account by, after logging in, click on the My Account link at the top of the screen. This will present you with a list of tabs, options that you can go into and edit. Running through each of the tabs as follows. The main Settings tab. Under here, if you select Edit, this is basically your customer name, customer number, other elements like web address, info, what your native currency is, how you measure your distance, any artwork links for ordering. You have an enhanced password security link, so this ensures that all passwords that are used in the system consist of 8 hexadecimal characters with upper and lower case and numbers. You can also set your default quote expiry days in here. It defaults to 30 as standard. Your measurement system, your CO2 per unit, and any artwork link parameter. Now in here you can select the parameter of associating an artwork link with a request for quote ID number or an order ID number. The most common one is the order ID. And then last but not least is the email address for off-queue. Now this email address is where all offline requests for quotes are going to be emailed to. So rather than an individual, if you have a group of individuals that you require this email being sent to, then please speak to your IT department or provider, and they will be able to set you up with a group email address, i.e. like info@haybrook.com, which will then have all the internal email personnel required linked to that email address, and they will all receive the off queue. Under the addresses tab, it is necessary to specify an address for on queue and also for list queue products as a default address. So you only need one address in here, but this address needs to be the starting point, so i.e. where it's being delivered from and then where it's going to, which will be the address that's specified when the buyer raises an on queue or a list queue quotation. To enter an address, simply click Create New, select whether it's default or not. You have a description and reference column, and then you can enter the line 1, line 2, city, region, postcode or zip code, and then the country of residence. You can also edit existing addresses or delete by using the edit or the delete icons at the end of the list there. The contacts, that is the list of contacts that reside and can use the system internally. So your contacts internally as a supplier, you would have two types of contact. You have an administrator or maybe a couple of administrators that can go in and change all these settings, as well as obviously manage and maintain what's going off quote wise. But more importantly, when you're creating a new contact, you can enter your name, title, any notes about the contact, a reference, the username, which is the username used to log in. The most common is obviously the email address. Phone, fax, mobile. We'll need your email address to verify. Skype details, what language, we have a range of languages. What currency you deal in, and obviously your time zone, which is important when quotes are being saved. If you specify you're an admin user, then you'll have access to all the administrative area that we're currently covering in this demonstration. And you can also have an option to receive order notifications. The other tick option is whether your account's locked or not. And you'll notice at the end of the contacts we have a few icons here. We have the edit icon, we have the lock, unlock icon. Now this icon here allows you to lock an existing contact. So if someone's left your company, then you can lock that user and you can still access their quotations in future. You can also regenerate a password reset. So if a user's locked themselves out of the system various times by logging in and entering the wrong password, that will obviously highlight in red and be locked. You can then unlock them, resend them the password reset email, and then they can obviously log back in. And of course you can delete a contact as well. You also have the ability to export your contacts list here as well if you have a large contacts list. The buyers tab shows you the buyers that you're linked to. Now there's 2 buyers obviously linked to this. There's also a column here which asks if there are any internal managers which deal exclusively with any of these buyers in the system. So if you've got multiple contacts, you might have contacts that deal with only one buyer and others that only deal with another buyer. So when they log in, they only see the buyers that they are linked to and the quotations. So it saves confusion. The required pricing is linked to whether the account's been activated or not, and also the list of services which are controlled by the overall system administrator are the services that you provide the buyers. So in this particular case, this top buyer, we can return prices for on-queue quotes, so automatic pricing, offline quotes, and list queue quotes based on our price matrices. But the buyer below, we're only returning the automated on-queue pricing for them. And once you're linked to a buyer, your buyers will then also show up with your margins. Now your margins are specifically and exclusively linked to on-queue quotes. So these are the quotes that are based on your machinery, real time and motion and production rules, i.e. your printed products that are being quoted on the fly automatically and returning prices in the system. Now in the margins, you'll notice at the top here there's a link for default margins. Now your default margins, they're your testing margins. So when you're raising quotes yourself by clicking on the on queue or going into quotes and saying new quote, any quote that you do in the system is going to use the default margins, not the margins associated to these buyers below. So you have the freedom to test margins without them actually influencing what's going off in the live environment and prices that are being returned by buyers and your clients alike. Now your default margins, when you click in there, these are based on sub-marginalizing elements, i.e. your paper, material costs which include inks and cartons and plate metals, any creative costs, any plate making costs, so they're like your origination, pre-press costs, printing, finishing, outwork costs, delivery. You have an overall margin, an overall digital margin if you marginalize your digital work differently to your offset litho type work, a buyer's fee. So if the buyer asks for a rebate on any given job in the system, then you can enter that in there also. A minimum AV value, so making sure that your quotes in the system don't fall below a specific minimum AV requirement, that can also be set, and a minimum price for a digital job and a minimum price for a litho offset job. Below are product-based margins. Now these product-based margins are overall margins, so they marginalize overall and on top of what's been done with your overall margins. So be cautious when entering amounts in here. Now these can be positive or negative margins, and if they're positive, an example might be that we're marginalizing specific types of work, whether it be flat sheet or trimmed, folded, stitched, perfect bound, PUR bound, etc. You might marginalize it because your production line's very busy at the moment, so you would say, I don't really want to encourage any stitch work at the moment because I'm very busy on my stitching lines, so I would up that by 15%. But in a couple of weeks' time, your stitching line might be very quiet, so I might want to encourage stitching work and put in a discount of 5%. You also have a tick option, and again, this is your default margins at the moment, so slightly different when associated with a buyer. But this is here saying, retain my paper margin when paper is supplied. Now, automatically on-queue quotes return prices to the buyers, your clients, and actually show the price with and without paper. Now, the markup for the paper can be retained against the cost of production. So when showing the cost of paper, the actual uplift of that paper, the handling charge for you to receive that paper and warehouse manage it, the uplift can be retained and added onto production. But if you choose to untick that, then that's like you offering a discount if your buyer actually supplies the paper. When applying this to a buyer, there's a couple of extra options in there. You have the option to use my global account default days for my expiry days, which we looked at earlier and said 30 days as default. Or if that was unticked, you could say for a certain buyer, I want my prices to expire maybe in 60 days or 90 days. It depends how long you have agreed with your buyer stroke client, how long you want to allow those prices to be valid for in the system. It might even be that you set it to 14 days. Once those margins have been set and applied, they're live, but it's very common for printers to go into the environment and update those margins on an almost weekly basis. The next two tabs, Products and My Paper, are specific to you, the printer only, and when you're setting up this environment for your own customers, not for buyers participating in the online environment, but your own specific customers, and these will be demonstrated at a later date. Buyer paper, in here what will be shown will be buyer's paper. Now normally buyers in the online environment have their own paper deals with merchants, and they put in their own paper pricing, all the sizing information, and then all printers alike who are competing in this online environment then use the prices that have been submitted by the paper merchants associated to the buyer to whom you are pricing for. If the buyer decides, well actually I don't want to provide pricing in that because I don't have a deal with a paper company, then they can tick those papers, and those papers will then be available for you to add your pricing on. And again, this will be something we demonstrate at a later date. Accreditations. Now we have a whole series of accreditations in the system, and it's as simple as clicking on Add New and then setting which accreditations you have. So if you're FFC, you click FFC like so. If you have ISO 9001, and you click that like so, and so on, until you have all your accreditations in the system. Now if any accreditations aren't in the system within your region, then they can easily be added, and then we can update the system and then they will be made available for you to select in future. The vehicle CO2 tab, it's not something you need to worry about. These are already preset in the background of the system. But here shows you exactly what's being calculated as an average based on kilogram or mile, or whether it's based on kilometre or whether it's based on pounds. Obviously that will be according to the region in which you live. Last but not least is the capacity tab. Now this capacity tab, there's a little warning at the top here. It says your settings will continue to roll from week to week unless you update them. Now what this is showing here is it's showing this week I've got spare capacity, next week I've got spare capacity, and thereafterwards I have spare capacity. So over a 3-week period we have spare capacity currently. There are 3 options. We can say we've got no capacity this week, we could say we've got some capacity the week after, and we've got spare capacity thereafter that, and save. Now it's very important to go in and select whether you have capacity or not. It's very vague, it's very broad in the sense that it's not equipment or product type specific. So if in doubt, it's best to use some capacity rather than spare capacity or no capacity as an option. The last element in the administrators area is the delivery. Now in the delivery area we have 3 different types of elements that we need to set. The first one is the country restrictions, then the packing types and the zones in which we're in. Now the country restrictions, this is basically saying what countries do we want to limit our delivery to. So if you're in the UK and you don't want to deliver to the European continent, then you could select England and Scotland and Wales. Or if you're in the United States and you don't want to deliver to Canada or Mexico, then you could select purely the United States of America. The packaging types, these are packaging types that are set up that you can physically use. So these are just a snippet of the packaging types that are in the system. So the 2 most common ones are the pallet and what is the weight of that packaging type, parcels and the weight of that packaging type. If you have an articulated lorry or stroke heavy goods vehicle, then obviously the weight of that, and then there's one at the bottom there called a tube. Now when you're selecting these packing types, you can tick for on queue which ones you want to use. And then you can also be specific. Now this is based on a list queue product setup, which again is going to be further demonstrated in another video, as to what products you wish to link these packing types to. So you can actually link these to products in the system, or leave them unassigned for all, or like the tube at the bottom, we could link that to something like a poster or a banner, and then that packing type purely is one tube per product that's going to then be delivered. So that's quite important. And to add in new packing types, quite simply you click on the plus button, and then you're saying what the name of the packing type is. So this could be a Maltese cross, or it could be a business card box, or it could be something else with a certain weight amount, and then that can be specifically set up with a delivery cost associated with it. The last element is the zones. Now the zones is based on what packing types we can do. So the delivery types we have in here are based on pallet delivery, parcel delivery, consignment HGV, and the tubes. They're the elements that we had in the packing types. And what you're doing here is you're selecting which delivery type you want, and you can add in a country-based zone. So you could keep that as purely a country-based zone, so anywhere within that country it could be delivered, or we could base that on distance-based zone. So that could be purely from X number of miles to the next bracket of miles or kilometers and there on afterwards, by simply stating your distances. Once you have those three elements tied in, you are then able to add in a price matrix. And the price matrix, they're based upon what types of deliveries you can achieve. So only select the ones that you can do in the list. There are obviously all the packing types in there that we looked at earlier, but the delivery priorities here are based upon, can you do business day by 9 AM, by 10 AM, by noon, any time? Can you do Saturday mornings? Can you do Saturday anytime? Or do you do next 2 days, next 3 days, or next 5 days? And once you've selected that, you can edit any one of those, and you can enter the cost in your currency as to how much you charge for each of those elements. Now, in this particular example, you'll notice there we've got one pallet equals 80, and then we say actually anything from 2 pallets onwards equals 60. So once it goes beyond 1, it would then add 60. So the first one's delivered at 80, and the next 2 plus are delivered at 60. And you can do a quick calculation just by entering the number of items in there and clicking the calculate, and that will display exactly where your cost should be. So if I had 2 items, 2 pallets in this particular case, going to anywhere in Italy and calculated that, then it shows me I have one at 80 and one at 60, giving me a total of 140. You can add further breaks in there, so if the cost of your pallets in this particular example become cheaper, then you can enter costs in accordingly. If it's based on distance, then you'll have a distance band going from X number of miles, and you would enter the cost per pallet based on distance rather than just an overnight standard business day anytime going just to Italy in this particular case. And then you can then add your next one, and then your next one for parcels, and then for tubes, and then for HGVs. So that's administering my account. So as a supplier administrator, you have access to this whole area here of my account and delivery, and able to update, maintain, and manage all the elements within that. But a non-admin user only has access to their pricing, to answer quotes offline, and that's it. So in the next video we're going to discuss list queue and how we can add pricing models to products in the system.